I'm Coffee Kevin. Mark Hellweg is my kind of coffee guy. Before manufacturing his own ratio coffee brewer, he created a website that sold other brands, only high-end ones. He learned what it takes to make a great coffee maker, along with what consumers will take and won't take. I asked Mark onto the show because he has one of the costliest of all drip brewers for sale, but also because he's got a unique perspective, having been both behind the scenes in retail and making the makers. I was thinking of, I first met Mark at the International Housewares show, but he's since reminded me we actually met when he exhibited at our very first CoffeeCon event in Warrenville, Illinois. He was scheduled to appear on this last show, or on the actually last month's show, and then the coronavirus hit. We've been planning ever since how we could meet up online. Here's our interview. Well, you mentioned something really interesting to me, and that is the automatic drip versus pour over. They are different, and reality is one right and the other wrong.
The way I think about that is automatic drip is superior to bad pour over or inconsistent pour over. And I think that's what we saw. I've never owned a cafe. I don't really intend to, but with my friends that own cafes, anecdotally, I've heard, just how difficult it is to maintain consistency among staff when you're doing pour over. And some shops really excel at it, and they make it as a point of what they do. I don't think pour over is ever going away. I don't think it will ever lose its appeal. I think it's a time tested, very ritual heavy type of brewing method. It's not right for every situation though. In my own home, like I said, I have 4 kids. I get up around 6:30ish. My wife and I both need about 16 to 20 ounces of coffee in the morning. We like to linger over, paper, have some quiet time in the morning. So for us to do, and then our kids wake up early. No matter what we do, they wake up early. So I don't need this like really meticulous thing that I'm doing every morning to try to create, a liter to a liter and a quarter of drip coffee. It's not for me. So in my context, I need an automatic drip coffee maker. But sometimes I want to go to a cafe and I want to order a pour over, and I want to see it done with the careful routine that's been dialed in by the roaster, the cafe owner, or whoever does that program. So I think the way I answer that question is it depends on the context. It depends on how much coffee you're making. It depends on the style of coffee. It depends on who's drinking it. And again, automatic drip I think is almost always superior to bad pour over, but that doesn't mean pour over is inferior. It just means you got to use a little bit of thinking about the context, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I oftentimes go to a cafe, and when they're super busy, I oftentimes will take what's made in the Fetco or the Bun coffee maker because I actually trust it better at that time.
Right. Yeah. When I go to a shop for the first time, I typically will order a pour over and a shot of espresso to just kind of like see how they approach coffee. But I've actually found that some shops here locally in Portland, I go there specifically for their espresso or maybe for their drip or whatever it is. And, it just, what are you looking for in your coffee? There's no right answer. I think there are good and bad examples of pour over, good and bad examples of drip, so on and so forth.
So is the newest ratio a downsizing of the first one? Is the first one still your flagship maker?
It is, although we've realized we've been manufacturing the 8 now since 2015. So here we are 5 years in. And we made some choices in the 8 that in hindsight, we thought we were, the term is design for manufacturing. If you've heard this term. Designing for manufacture means as you choose the materials and the size and the scope and the tolerances and everything else that goes into a product, you have to not just go blue sky with whatever you want to design. You have to actively engage with the people who are going to be making your stuff to make sure it's possible to manufacture it. And we tried to do that, but in hindsight, we didn't do enough of that. And so we essentially have ended up with a very difficult to manufacture product. I'll give you just one example. So this is my aid. This is what I brew every morning. Hand blown glass water tank. I have a video on the Ratio site of how they make that tank. It's incredible. It's tube stock that's this wide, 125 millimeters thereabouts. Comes on these giant pipes, basically glass pipes that are like 20 feet long, and they use flames to cut it down to this size and to collapse the bottom into its own into the bottom of the tank. They use carbonized wood tooling and some steel tooling. So they're spinning and they're shaping and they're crimping, and then they have to add we have two tubes on the inside. One has holes in it that sends cold water to the heating element. The other one is two tubes, one that's a solid part of the tank, the other that sends hot water from the heating element up to the shower head. And if the tubes aren't perpendicular, and if the holes aren't cut to the right size, and if the tank is too tall, and if it's not lapped correctly flat at the top, all these little things that go into this part contribute to a very complicated thing. We went through probably 4 or 5 factories before we finally settled on this long-term partner we have that's able to make this thing. And it's encased between metal. There's not a lot of forgiveness there's no forgiveness between metal. So we learned some lessons. And the wood trim. This is a die-cast aluminum part. This is a die-cast aluminum part. Cast parts have to have draft so that they can pop out of the tool. If the sidewall is straight up and down, it's just difficult to pull the part out of the tool. So the wood trim, similarly to the cast part, has to have a one degree of draft to fit onto the cast aluminum parts. So it's not as simple as take a sheet of walnut and just bandsaw cut out the shape. It's like this has to use essentially, I think it's a 5-axis CNC machine to cut it out, and then they have to cut in all these features in it, and then it's hand sanded and it's hand finished, and it's just like, honestly, I've been an espresso machine retailer since 2008. This thing should be $1,000. Like, look at the Rancilio Sylvia. This Rancilio Sylvia is $750. But if you took apart the Sylvia, it's a great machine. I'm not criticizing it. But if you took it apart, it's fairly basic rolled stainless steel sheet and a couple of cast parts and a couple of plastic trim pieces. It's $750. This thing should be $1,000. But we're already 2 or 3 or 4 times the other drip coffee makers in the market. So we have that weakness of being the only one that's offering this really expensive coffee maker. It's like if you were only BMW, you were the only company that had a $60,000 sedan and every other car was $20,000. It's a lot easier if there's also Audi and Mercedes, and people can kind of make that comparison.
That really is important in terms of market, is right?
As I've been a retailer of coffee equipment for 12 years, I guess. I don't know. Is it 12 years? Yeah, 12 years. I guess I've probably become a little less dogmatic about some stuff. What happens to me all the time. I'll go into someone's kitchen, they're like, "Oh, sorry, just ignore the Keurig or the Nespresso." I'm like, if that coffee maker is bringing you joy, I'm happy. It's not about like there's one coffee maker for everybody. And so what I try to think about as I'm looking at brands or coffee makers to offer, I would say, is there a clear value proposition that this product makes? And is there enough of a well-defined customer that would be into this? Because if you look at drip coffee makers, just as a general category. You go to the Housewares show, you log on to Amazon, you look at drip coffee makers. I mean, there are an astounding amount of coffee makers out there. And I look at them and I see, so many plastic and stainless bits that are slammed together. And some of them are horrible. I don't think they should be offered. And some of them are pretty okay. And some of them are exceptional. I think the Bonavita Metropolitan, that little simple black brewer with the glass carafe, it's like $100. It's a great brewer. Like, if people ask me, like, what should I buy if I'm not gonna get ratio? I'm like, get that thing. Or Moccamaster. Moccamaster's a great brewer. If you like kind of a simple and vintage appeal, time-tested vintage, Moccamaster is awesome. They have beautiful color palettes you can choose from. If you want simple and modern, I think Ratio is a compelling option, hopefully. Anyway, all that to say, I think that to answer your question, we don't have a direct competitor yet, at least, that's doing a really simple, full-size batch brewer with the heavy emphasis on the quality materials, the brewing science, essentially automating the brewing science and not giving too many options. We don't have a touch screen in the front. You can't dial in the temperature. We don't have a cold brew option. So if you're looking for modern, full-featured brewer, get the Breville Precision. If you're looking for, I just want a good, simple drip brewer, again, Bonavita has several great options. So the Ratio customer is interested in, the aesthetic form of it, the quality. This is a cast stainless steel lid on the 6. That wasn't cheap. That wasn't cheap to design. It wasn't cheap tooling. It's not a cheap part. But this metal on metal sound, that's a Ratio signature. We have my kids probably threw it away, but we have a cast metal lid on the 8. So not everyone cares about that, and that's fine. But if you care about design and quality and you want your coffee to be extracted well without having to really think about it too much, that's kind of the Ratio approach.
I guess a question I would ask is, what is the biggest mistake? I assume you study consumers. If not, through research, purchasing research, you probably are like me. I'm just always curious. I always want to see, if someone invites me for dinner and they say I'm making coffee, I always say, can I watch? I want to see what they do. Uh-huh. And then the thing is, I got to control the emotions on my face to not, everything's fine.
Yeah.
What do you think they do right and wrong?
There's been a pretty big increase in general awareness about coffee, especially coffee in general, and I think how to make it. I think if you look at the typical coffee aware consumer, I think their general baseline knowledge is higher than it was in 2008 or 2000, certainly before 2005. I think that the word is getting out there about the importance of the grinder. Ratio doesn't have a grinder yet, but grinders are really critically important. So we our friends at Baratza have awesome options. That's probably the biggest thing people don't want to do. They get excited about the brewer, but they don't want to spend money in the grinder. Water quality is frequently misunderstood. We're trying to make that a little bit easier. We're including 2 little packets of third wave water for free with every 8. So it's not hard to get optimized water for drip, but people just don't think about water. And then, I don't know. I personally think I think probably one of the bigger opportunity spaces out there is offering something along the lines of what Keurig and Nespresso do, because the capsule, opening up something, plopping it in, pushing a button, you're not messing with the grinder, you're not messing with the scale. The grind setting there's just one option. I think that's probably the mistake, if you want to call it a mistake. I think maybe it's the most misunderstood aspect of home brewing, is a couple of the problems with it. First of all, the dose on all those is way off. So you're paying a lot of money. You're paying, I don't know, $40 a pound or whatever, something like that for the coffee. It's dosed too low. It's brewed too cool. And that's why the beverage doesn't taste good. And then if you actually accounted for the amount of waste you create over the lifespan of one of those products, I mean, it's kind of shocking how much waste you create. So I see a big opportunity there. I don't know if we'll do anything to offer an option in that space, but that's probably the biggest thing that's happened since 2008 when I got into coffee equipment that really has become a big section of the market, is this heavy orientation towards convenience. And I think it definitely compromises the quality of the cup and has some waste issues. There are companies that are looking into this. There was some cool stuff at SEA. I mean, George Howell had some, frozen concentrate in K-cups that was delicious. So technology, I'm sure will get there. I'm sure it'll get better. But currently, I think the options in the single cup are pretty sad.
What would be a favorite roast of coffee for you?
Generally speaking, I like 3 different styles of coffee. I like really sweet single origin, centrals. I like well-developed, definitely not roasty, but sweetness. I love sweetness in a single origin. Central. I love a well-done blend for drip. My wife and I have cream with our coffee in the morning and then black coffee after that. So a good blend. Verve, Davern Wise, ONYX. I mean, there's some great blends out there, as you know. And then the third coffee I really like would be a really, really interesting, really floral, really, really fruity, really almost weird coffee that needs to be enjoyed slowly and without cream. So Proud Mary is up the hill. They do some weird coffees. There's some natural process stuff that Push and Pull does here in Portland. Certainly Heart and Cova and Never aren't the local companies that I go to for those kind of weird coffees. And I also love espresso. And espresso, I'm a little old school. I don't really like the really large shots. I don't know. I think I just developed my taste for espresso in around 2007, 2008. So, more like a 1 to 1.5 brew ratio. So, and I like macchiatos too. I won't lie. I like just a well-made macchiato is probably my favorite way to drink espresso.
First of all, I like it. You're a coffee person who designs coffee makers, who actually tries other people's coffee makers.
I think my view on design is, this was actually expressed by Tony Fidel, I think that's his last name, from the Nest thermostat guy. I read this quote years ago and it stuck with me. He essentially said, you can't crowdsource a design. You have to have a point of view on design, but you use your customers' input to adjust the design, or maybe understanding how they're going to actually use it, and then you might refine your design. But you don't go out there and say, "Hey world, what do you want?" and then just cobble it together. But if you just design in a vacuum, or in a bubble without empathy towards how people will experience your product, I think that can work sometimes, especially if it's maybe it's an iconic product that's been around forever. It's a heritage brand or something like it can work. But I think if you're a new brand and you have to earn the trust of your customers and they're choosing you over a longer established player, I don't see how you could possibly not really, really try to be empathetic and try the coffee makers. And also you have to have you have to have respect for the existing players. You know, sometimes talking to other product people or entrepreneurs, I've heard this kind of idea of like essentially like, oh yeah, everyone, all those other companies, they're just a bunch of dum-dums. Like everything they do is stupid. It's like, really? Those companies have been around for 50 years or 75 years, and they're huge and they're profitable and they're dum-dums? I don't think that's true. You know, it doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity to do something different. Certainly, I definitely see that. But you have to have a little bit of humility, I guess, about both your customers and how they're going to use it and how they experience it, and then certainly with your competitors.
Mark, I've taken up too much of your time, and thank you so much for letting us hang out together.
It's really been fun, Kevin. I appreciate your conversational sort of, you know, the way you can talk about a million different things. I appreciate that about you, and I look forward to an in-person get-together when we're allowed to travel again, I guess.
Cheers to that. Thank you, and we will be in touch very soon. Well, not that soon, but when I'm finally done with the review. And again, thank you for talking with us today.
That's great. Thank you so much to both of you. All right, have a great weekend.
Wow. In case you were curious, Mark and I could probably talk brewing and brewers for hours. This is what Pat felt were the highlights. If you're interested, just look for Mark Hellweg interview Director's Cut on Coffee Companions or Coffee Con's YouTube channel, actually. I know I want it all. They'll probably be up there next couple of days. I really enjoyed speaking with Mark, and we'll continue that. And actually, I'm working on the review right now, so that'll be forthcoming as well. I'm Coffee Kevin. Thanks for tuning in, and be safe.